The silence in the ancient temple had a weight unlike any other, a chilled promise that clung to your spine before the first pale light of dawn could fully touch the worn stones. You awoke to the faint scent of aged papyrus, the dust settling quietly in every narrow crevice as the timid morning filtered through slender windows. The air was cool and still, carrying the lingering smell of resin mixed with the faint bitterness of desert sand seeping into the cracked walls. Your rough fingertips traced the cold stone surfaces, lingering over the faded carvings that whispered secrets centuries old. The heavy responsibility, not spoken but deeply felt, pressed down like the tomb's oppressive shadow. The first light cast a pale blue hue across the chamber, washed out like washed linen left too long under the sun, drawing out the slightest imperfections, cracks in the walls, worn edges on the pillars, and the faint peeling of ancient color on weathered hieroglyphs. Your footsteps echoed softly, hesitant on the cool, uneven floor, each one punctuated by the faint, distant creak of settling wood and the near-silent sigh of shifting stone. The coarse weave of your linen cloak scraped gently against your skin, its worn threads whispering the passage of countless nights under the same quiet vigilance. Outside, the awakening village lay shrouded in a veil of morning mist, motionless and muted beneath the slow rise of a pale sun. It was a stillness that felt stretched, as if the world itself held its breath. You remembered how in another era, a lost flame meant the end of more than mere light. If today's world frets over a dying battery, imagine then the dread of watching your last fire's ember dim, knowing there would be no spark to rekindle it. The comparison tugged at your weary mind, a brief, wry note amid the solemn ritual. The routine called you forward, the careful sweeping of sand and dust from each sacred glyph, the slow, deliberate tracing of each symbol that had long since lost its meaning to time, but remained vital in form. With measured care, your hands repeated the gesture of wiping clean the altar stones, the soft bristles brushing across cold marble, lifting layers of forgotten centuries into the air. You recited silent prayers, indistinct murmurs of dedication, uttered more by habit than comprehension. Your voice barely a breath in the vast emptiness. The incense smoke curled languidly, its scent weaving through the chambers, soothing the rawness of your thoughts. A fleeting moment of calm amidst unyielding vigilance. A sudden hush spread unexpectedly. The faint barking of dogs somewhere outside ceased abruptly, as if the world outside respected the unspoken commands that bound you here. Nearby, the villagers exchanged glances, subtle and loaded. their eyes heavy with unspoken warnings and fears, only barely veiled beneath their calm countenances. The very air thickened with a silent tension, the feeling that beneath these walls, beneath these rituals, something ancient and fragile awaited, poised just beneath the surface of your steady, deliberate actions. Your heart quickened imperceptibly, still steady enough to keep moving forward, yet aware of this fragile moment where routine and unseen danger intertwined. The weight of your role, guardian of forbidden knowledge, watcher of secrets long buried, pressed ever more heavily. You prepared once more to seal the hidden alcoves, wrapping the fragile scrolls in cloth as thin and worn as your own resolve, hiding them away from eyes that must never meet the truths they held. Before Morpheus claims you fully, take a moment and double-check if you're still subscribed. For some, the button has vanished, and I wouldn't want you to miss the next stories for sleep. While you're at it, leave a soft like a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where do you listen from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little corner of calm alive. Thanks for being part of it. The air remained dense, a silence so profound it felt as though the stones themselves held their breath alongside you. The texture of the temple walls beneath your fingertips was rougher now, their ancient carvings seemingly deeper, sharper, as if the fading light unveiled secrets carefully layered over time. You paused, feeling the subtle shift of dust particles settling slowly back onto surfaces disturbed by your movements. The faint chill lingered, but a hint of warmth began to creep through the narrow windows, brushing your skin like a cautious caress. Your breath, slow and measured, mingled with the rising haze of incense, the smoke spiraling upwards in lazy curls, a delicate veil over the faint cracks running across the altar. You stepped carefully forward, each footfall muffled against the uneven floor, the cool stone pressing cold through the thin soles of your sandals. The carved pillars loomed like watchful sentinels, shadows stretching long and thin toward the edges of the chamber. Every sound, the soft scrape of your cloak, the tiniest creak of shifting wood overhead, felt amplified in the vast stillness. Outside, the distant murmurs of the awakening village wove a delicate thread of movement into the heavy quiet. But inside, time seemed to fold back onto itself, thick with the weight of centuries. Your fingers traced the worn reliefs again, lingering on the swirls and lines that told stories lost to the lips of men, but captured forever by stone. The surface beneath your touch was cool, uneven, mottled with patches of faint moss and brittle flakes of what might once have been vibrant pigment. You inhaled slowly, drawing in the faint, musty scent of aged parchment and the sharp tang of resin smoke. It mingled with the dry, biting aroma of sand, carried in through unseen cracks, a reminder of the vast desert stretching beyond this refuge of shadows. Around you, The quiet breathed in slow, deliberate rhythms. The incense smoke thickened, softening harsh edges, blurring the lines between now and then, present and past. You found yourself repeating the gestures, the slow wiping of sacred stones with a cloth dulled by time. The repetitive motion lulled your mind into a half-dream, a trance stitched together by the delicate scraping sounds and the faint whisper of your silent prayers. Each syllable slipped from your lips in shadowed tones, a faint breath almost caught before fading away into the stillness. The alcoves to your left beckoned, dark hollows housing fragile scrolls, carefully wrapped in worn linen. Your fingertips brushed the coarse fabric, so thin it felt fragile as the trust you bore. You paused again, steeling yourself as the weight of responsibility settled heavier upon your chest, a presence unseen but undeniably felt. The burden of guarding truths older than memory pressed upon you like a stone, rough and unyielding. You bent to tuck the scrolls gently out of sight, careful not to disturb the dust that floated like tiny spirits in the shafts of early light. As you pressed the cloth-wrapped bundle into place, your eyes caught a flicker of movement near the far entrance, a shadow that seemed to hesitate just beyond the threshold. The village was awakening, but here, in this place, something held back, paused. Your heart beat a fraction faster, though your steps remained slow and steady. You moved toward the source of the shadow, the faint shuffle of sand underfoot, marking the careful path between towering pillars. The air grew cooler here, carrying a sharper hint of moisture, and earth mingled with the faint metallic tang of something else. Perhaps the memory of water long absent. The texture of the floor changed beneath your feet. Smooth stones gave way to rougher patches, uneven, like scars carved by time or neglect. As you reached the entrance, the whisper of wind slipped through the cracked threshold, bringing with it a fresh wave of cold that wrapped around your arms. You paused to breathe it in, the sharp clarity, a brief relief from the heavy incense behind you. Outside, the desert's pale blue morning stretched endlessly, the sun slowly burning off the mist with its fragile gold. A sudden, distant clatter echoed faintly, carried on the dry breeze. The sound was brief, but its sharpness shattered the delicate stillness, twisting the calm into something taut, fragile. You turned your gaze back into the temple's depths, wary and alert. The villagers' quiet exchanges from earlier flickered back to mind, eyes heavy with silent warnings, lips pressed in lines of concealed fear. You felt, rather than saw, the temple's ancient pulse quicken beneath your feet, a whisper of movement threading through the stone, as if the walls themselves remembered what you could not. A slow, creeping dread unfurled at the edges of your consciousness, soft and insistent. The silence was not empty. It held a waiting breath, a watchfulness folded into shadow. You took a step deeper into the chamber, your fingertips trailing lightly over the cold marble altar again, tracing the familiar grooves, worn and hollow from ages of hands like yours. The prose of the past lay in these textures, in these relics of devotion and duty. You whispered the silent prayers once more, each word a fragile lifeline stretched taut between present and past. Then, in the shifting half-light, a faint sound, a soft, deliberate clicking, came from the far corner of the room, barely perceptible yet undeniably there. Your breath caught. You turned slowly, eyes narrowing as your gaze swept the shadows. The temple's depths seemed suddenly more alive, the weight of remembered secrets settling around you like a shroud. You realized, with a quiet certainty that rippled through your limbs, that something long hidden was beginning to stir. The soft clicking continued, almost imperceptible beneath the steady breath of the temple, a quiet rhythm that seemed to beckon from the depths beyond the carved pillars. You stood frozen for a moment, fingertips drifting over the etched marble as if sensing the pulse beneath your touch. A subtle thrum woven into the cold stone. The air felt thicker here, the incense smoke curling slower, wrapping around you like a silken shroud, heavy with the weight of coming change. Slowly, you turned toward the sound again, careful not to disturb the fragile stillness. The shadows pooled deep in the corners, the flickering light from your lantern casting long fingers across the worn hieroglyphs. Your eyes traced the delicate symbols, slowly peeling from the surface like faded memory. Yet somehow the shapes pressed with newfound urgency. The soft scrape of the cloth as you brushed the altar stones became a steady anchor, grounding you in the moment, even as the temple whispered of things best left untouched. Each breath you took filled your lungs with the mingled scents of resin and desert dust, the sharp bite of the air against your throat, a reminder of how fragile this sanctuary truly was. Your legs moved forward, steady but cautious, sandals shifting silently across the uneven floor, an old stone graying beneath your careful tread. The faint groan of ancient timber overhead seemed to echo your hesitation, every creak a note in the temple's restless hymn. As you neared the far corner, where the clicking originated, the faint outline of a narrow passage became visible, carved roughly into the rock beyond the scroll alcoves. The light reached only so far, swallowing the space in darkness that seemed to breathe with expectation. Your fingers brushed the edge of a hidden latch, its cold metal slick beneath your touch. There was no rushing here, only careful patience, a deliberate touch that mirrored the slow beat outside. Feels surprisingly distant now, the village and its muted morning wrapped in a soft haze of oblivion. Inside, the walls seem to lean closer, their countless carvings alive with silent warnings. The scrolls you had just hidden felt heavier in your hands, each fold a whispered promise to protect secrets that were not yours to tell. The weight of the temple pressed inward, a silent breath held between past and present. The clicking stopped abruptly, replaced by a faint rustling deeper in the shadowed passage, a sound like dry leaves stirred by an unseen hand. You drew a slow breath, the faint chill crawling up your arms despite the hesitant warmth of dawn beginning to filter through the temple windows. There was no choice but to move onward, to follow this fragile thread of sound and light. Even as every instinct urged caution, your footsteps were measured, a slow cadence that matched the quiet rhythm of the temple's heartbeat. The walls here were rougher, scarred by time and neglect, their surfaces textured with tiny fissures where sand and dust had settled like ancient snow. The scent of earth and a faint mustiness blended with the lingering incense, a reminder of fires long since burned out, but never forgotten. Your hand trailed along the cool surface, fingers hesitating over a carved symbol that shimmered faintly, almost alive under the shifting light. You reached a small chamber beyond the passage, its doorway carved with faint traces of gold leaf, dulled by centuries, but still catching the light in whispers. The air inside was cooler, heavier, tinged with a faint metallic scent that pricked at your senses. Like a precognitive warning, in the center, a pedestal rose from the floor, its surface cracked and worn, but still commanding attention. Carefully, you reached out to rest your palm on the cold stone, feeling the rough texture beneath your skin. Something shifted then, a subtle vibration that thrummed through your arm and settled deep in your chest. The stillness was shattered by the distant echo of a slow, deliberate breath, as if the temple itself had exhaled after a long slumber. The light faltered, shadows rippling across the walls like a living thing. Your pulse quickened imperceptibly, yet your movements remained deliberate, slow and steady, as though urgency was both a burden and a necessity. Your eyes adjusted to the dimness, revealing an ancient scroll lying atop the pedestal. Its surface was fragile, the parchment cracked and brittle, edges curling like dried leaves in an endless autumn. The ink, faded to a whisper, hinted at words lost to time, but not entirely forgotten. You reached out, fingertips hovering just above the precious artifact, the responsibility heavier than the weight of the stone beneath your palm. Outside the chamber, the faint sound of footsteps stirred the quiet once more, soft and tentative, echoing in the distance like ghosts retracing paths long abandoned. The village remains silent, held in a breathless pause, as if the dawn itself hesitated. You paused, pulling back slightly, feeling the cool air drift over your skin like a cautious touch. The flicker of your lantern cast trembling shadows that danced along the walls, weaving between ancient symbols as your gaze flickered upward. The temple, single bead of sweat, traced a slow path down your temple. The tightness in your chest blossoming into a quiet, persistent tension. Yet beneath it all, a flicker of warmth stirred, a fragile thread of hope that tangled with the dread, pressing softly at the edges of your mind. The past and present danced, a delicate waltz here. The weight of countless generations balanced on a knife's edge. You settled your breath, letting the quiet seep into your bones. The soft scrape of cloth as you readied to secure the scroll once more. Yet before your fingers could lift the fragile bundle, a subtle shifting in the stone beneath your feet made you freeze. The chamber seemed to exhale again, a low rumble, almost lost in the silence. Your gaze darted to the shadows where the passage narrowed. And there, just beyond the reach of the lantern's glow, a glimmer caught your eye, a faint pulse of light, unearthly and deliberate. A knowing chill crawled along your spine. The temple was no longer just a place to guard. It was beginning to reveal itself, and you were its unwilling witness. The narrow passage ahead lay shrouded in shadows that seemed to thicken around you, pressing in like the hush before a storm. Your fingertips lingered on the cold, rough stone, each groove and fissure telling silent stories. The faint pulse of that strange, unearthly light flickered just beyond, beckoning you with a subtle insistence, a whisper that threaded through the lingering incense haze. You inhaled deeply, the sharp tang of desert dust mingling with the resin's sweetness, filling your lungs with a bittersweet combination of earth and memory. Your sandals made no sound as you stepped forward, cautious and slow. The floor beneath uneven and worn smooth by 1,000 unseen footsteps. The walls seemed to breathe around you, their carvings twisting into new shapes in the flickering glow of your lantern. Ancient symbols taking on renewed life in the dim light. Every creak in the timber overhead rang sharply, pulling your attention to the silence that followed. A silence stretched taut, holding its breath with you. The passage narrowed further, the air growing cooler, carrying a faint moisture pressed deep within the stone. Your fingers brushed over the carved edges, now rougher with age, their surfaces mottled by patches of moss and lingering traces of pigment that defied time's erasure. A soft rustling sound echoed ahead, dry and fragile, like brittle leaves. Disturbed by a gentle breeze, you paused, breath caught beneath the weight of the moment, the stillness folding over you like a cloak. Slowly, you moved on, each step deliberate, measured, as if the temple itself urged patience. The faint light ahead wavered, revealing the rough outline of a small alcove carved deep into the rock. The air hung dense here, charged with a presence too old to name, but heavy nevertheless. A waiting held suspended in time. You felt your heartbeat settle into a slow thrum, matching the quiet rhythm that seemed to pulse beneath your feet, beneath the temple's very bones. Your hand found the edge of a stone pedestal, whisper long forgotten. You rested your palm lightly, the cool hardness of the marble anchoring you amid the rising tension. The faint metallic scent grew stronger here, blending with the dry earth and resin, prickling at your senses as though the stone itself carried a hidden charge. Reaching toward the center of the pedestal, your fingers brushed the brittle edges of an ancient scroll, lying curled like the last leaf of a dying season. The parchment crackled softly beneath your touch, delicate and fragile as thin ice that might break with the faintest pressure. Ink faded to a ghostly gray, hinted at secrets stranded at the edge of memory. You hesitated, the weight of centuries folding inward, the heavy mantle of duty settling like a stone on your chest. Then, as if breaking the spell of stillness, a soft, shifting sound emerged from deeper within the alcove. A subtle movement, so quiet it might have been the slow sigh of the temple itself. You froze, breath shallow, eyes searching the shadows beyond the faint pool of light. The heavy silence trembled. Something unseen stirred in the darkness, a presence neither hostile nor benign, but poised and watchful. Your lantern's flame flickered, casting long, trembling shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The carved symbols seemed to shift and blur, caught between the past and something just beyond the veil of understanding. You took a slow step back, the stone floor cool beneath your sandal-clad foot, the prickling chill chasing a slow wave of unease along your spine. Outside, distant murmurs of the waking village flowed faintly through the cracked threshold, the gentle cascade of life untouched by this place's ancient, tangled breath. Yet here, within these time-worn walls, you felt the barrier thin, as if the temple's heart beat faster, its pulse reaching out through stone and dust to brush your skin. Your fingers clasped the scroll tightly, drawing it close as if to shield the fragile knowledge bound within from an unseen gaze. The faint rustling sound rippled again, soft as whispers slipping through cracks in stone. You strained your ears, catching a curious cadence beneath the noise, a slow, deliberate tapping. The sound summoned a memory, the rhythmic beating of a distant drum, the echo of a signal long lost to wandering wind. Something fragile, balanced on a knife's edge here. You shifted your weight, every sense alert and stretched thin. The thin thread of incense smoke curled upward, wrapping around your wrist like a shroud. And for a moment, you felt caught between worlds, between shadows and light, past and present, the silent weight of memory, and the awakening stirrings of something yet unnamed. A sudden chill graze the back of your neck, brief but sharp, like a breath from the desert's cold night. Your eyes darted toward the narrow recess where the light had first flickered, and there, just at the edge of vision, a faint glimmer pulsed once, slow and steady. The stone beneath your feet seemed to hum faintly, a subtle vibration threading through the cool air. You swallowed hard, the tightness in your chest blossoming into a cautious hope tangled with a dread that wound its way deep into your bones. Every step, every breath felt heavy with the weight of what was coming, the fragile boundary between known and unknown, trembling, poised to yield. As the temple's ancient heartbeat echoed softly around you, a new, unmistakable sound sliced through the stillness. The low, deliberate grinding of stone, distant but growing nearer. Your gaze fixed on the dark passage beyond the alcove, where the faint glow now pulsed with increasing urgency. There was no turning back. The path ahead waited, silent and watching, as a slow truth unfurled beneath the tremor of time. The faint pulse of unspoken energy seemed to ripple through the temple's ancient bones as you lingered in the dim chamber, your palm resting lightly on the cracked pedestal. The brittle scroll beneath your fingers felt impossibly fragile, like a whisper on the edge of unraveling, and the weight of its silence pressed down, folding into the stillness around you. The faint metallic scent lingered, sharp and unsettling, weaving through the dense air like a thread of warning. Your breath came slow, deliberate, as the lantern's flicker cast hesitant shadows across the rough walls. The carved symbols appeared to shift subtly, their outlines wavering between stone and memory. Each step backward was measured, careful, as if your movements might fracture the delicate moment into shards of sound and shadow. The cold floor pressed beneath your sandals, steadying your uncertain pulse, even as your senses sharpened to the softest hints of movement just beyond the lantern's trembling glow. Somewhere deeper within the temple came a low, grinding noise, a ragged whisper that stirred the dust and echoes alike. It pressed against your awareness, a quiet insistence wrapped in the heavy fabric of silence. Your heart stretched taut, synchronizing with this slow, deliberate rhythm, a breath, a creak, a call from the past reborn. The walls themselves felt alive, each fissure a vein, pulsing faintly beneath your skin's touch. You stepped away from the pedestal, the fragile scroll still clasped close as if shielding yourself from the secrets it contained. The narrow passage beyond the alcoves swallowed your feet, dark and patient, the air cooler here and thick with the dry scent of earth and long-forgotten incense. Your fingertips brushed the rough masonry, tracing the weathered marks left by countless hands, some tender, some hurried, all lost to time. A faint rustle echoed ahead, barely audible but growing clearer. like the soft murmurs of dry leaves stirred by an unseen breeze. You paused, senses coiling tight, every breath shallow and reverent. The cracks along the passage swallowed light greedily, hiding both the small glimmer of ancient torchlight and the creeping dread that curled at the edges of your mind. Your steps resumed, slow and cautious, each one a tentative question posed to the temple's endless ribs. The carved symbols lining the walls became sharper under the wavering lantern, their softened edges resolute and urgent. Time drifted, folding in on itself, the present blurring with whispers of centuries past. The scent of resin thickened, cold smoke curling languidly toward the unseen ceiling. You felt the faint brush of something unseen, like a shadow shifting just beyond your reach, or a breath held beneath stone. Ahead, the passage widened briefly, revealing an archway framed by keeling gilding and delicate reliefs. You step through the threshold into a small chamber, its floor dust-covered and seemingly untouched for aeons. The air here vibrated with a peculiar stillness, a sacred hush wrapped around your chest, lending weight to each heartbeat. The walls were alive with faintly glowing hieroglyphs, ghostly traces of gold and blue that flickered like dying stars against the stone. The lantern's flame trembled as it caught a delicate amulet resting on a stone basin at the room's center. Its metal was tarnished, but wholly intact. The surface etched with symbols so fine they seemed to ripple beneath your gaze. Your hand hovered above it, hesitant yet drawn, wary of the fragile balance between curiosity and caution. A distant rumble echoed somewhere far above, subtle and rolling, as if the temple itself exhaled a breath held too long. The incense smoke thickened, circling your ankles like a soft veil, mingling with the faint but unmistakable hint of jasmine carried on. A dry desert breeze. Your fingers curled around the scroll once more, the fragile parchment whispering beneath your grasp, as if eager and unwilling to reveal its secrets. A sudden shift in the stillness tightened the space around you, a change so slight it might have been imagined, a nervous quiver threading through stone and shadow, the faint pulse of light, once a distant flicker, now pulsed with steadier rhythm, casting eerie tendrils of brilliance that danced reluctantly across the walls. Your gaze traced the point of origin, a narrow crevice near the room's far edge, nearly hidden behind a broken pillar. Slow as autumn leaves drifting on the wind, you moved toward the crevice, every sound muted by the dense silence. The cool air brushing your cheek carried a crispness unexpected in this chamber, a fragile breath of the world outside intruding on the temple's embrace. Your fingertips grazed the jagged edges of the crack, rough as torn parchment, and you hesitated, balanced between retreat and fragile resolve. The quiet, raspy click returned, steady and measured, like a heartbeat whispered beneath layered echoes. The temple's ancient pulse quickened alongside yours, a slow thrum threading through the veins of stone. You sensed, rather than saw, the movement in the shadows, a stirring waiting to break free from centuries of slumber. The amulet's faint glow seemed to flicker in answer, its light now weaving in subdued patterns, like the rhythm of a slow, secret song. Your breath caught softly, a fragile anchor in the rising tide of anticipation. The air thickened with the scent of resin and earth, the mingled past pressing close, offering both promise and warning. Without fully understanding, you felt the temple unfold before you, no longer simply a relic to guard, but a living memory poised on the edge of awakening. The fragile scroll trembled in your hands, a thin thread tying you to the unfurling mystery. As you drew the amulet closer, a distant, grinding resonance deepened, echoing through the stone halls, a sound both ancient and unrelenting. The temple held its breath once more, and in that suspended moment, you realized that whatever stirred in the shadows was not merely a secret waiting to be uncovered, but a presence now reaching out to meet you. The faint glow near the crevice flickered gently as you stepped closer, the cool air brushing against your face with a quiet insistence. Each footfall felt heavier now, the dusty floor pressing down under your sandals like the weight of unspoken stories. The light seemed to pulse in rhythm with your breath, a slow, deliberate heartbeat just beyond reach. Your fingertips hovered over the jagged stone edges, rough and uneven, as if carved by hands long vanished. There was a silence so thick that it muffled even the faint rustle of your cloak, wrapping you in a velvet hush woven by centuries. You moved forward with a measured care, each movement slow and purposeful, as if disturbing the air too quickly might break the fragile stillness. Your eyes traced the shadows pooling beyond the threshold, deep and velvety, offering no hint of what waited inside. The scent of resin thickened, curling between your fingers like smoke from a distant fire, weaving through the chamber's colder breath and mingling with the dusty, dry earth beneath your feet. The soft click you had heard moments ago returned, steady and slow, a metronome marking time beyond understanding. Your palm rested once more on the cool stone pedestal, the brittle scroll beneath your fingers trembling imperceptibly, a faint quiver almost lost among the temple's whispered secrets. The carved hieroglyphs around you seemed to sway and shimmer in the dim light, their shapes folding into one another like memories, briefly remembered and quickly forgotten. You steadied your breath, feeling the slow pull of time pressing inward, collapsing moments into each other like layers of faded parchment. It was a delicate balance, that thin line between reverence and fear, between holding and releasing. A soft murmur echoed through the chamber, barely audible, like the rustle of dry leaves stirred by a hesitant breeze. You turn slowly, eyes narrowing as your gaze searched the darker corners where light seemed reluctant to dwell. The temple's walls leaned closer now, carved faces staring down with worn eyes, silent witnesses to unfolding moments. A distant wind whispered across the desert outside, carrying with it the fragile warmth of dawn, a subtle glow bleeding through the cracked stone, softening edges and lending a fleeting comfort to the ancient cold. Your fingers curled tightly around the fragile scroll's edge, the worn linen wrapping crinkling softly in your grasp. The air felt charged, stretched taut, like a thin veil threatening to tear, and with each passing breath, the shifting shadows deepened their secrets. The soft grinding sound swelled gently from the depths beyond the alcove, weaving into the chamber's stillness like a slow rising tide. It was neither threatening nor welcoming, but patient, a drawn-out sigh from a slumber long disturbed. You allowed your gaze to drift toward the narrow passage again, where the faint glowing light pulsed steadily, steady as the distant beating of a hidden drum. The floor beneath your feet changed texture, the once smooth stone now scarred and uneven, like the scar tissue of a living wound. Every step forward was a question, every breath the answer searched for quietly, hidden beneath layers of dust and time. The walls seemed to pulse faintly with the rhythm of your heartbeat, echoing through carved crevices and peeling paint, like a secret shared between stone and flesh. Ahead, the passage opened into a wider chamber, its vaulted ceiling lost to darkness. Faint glimmers of ancient paint clung stubbornly to the walls, a whisper of turquoise and sun-baked ochre dissolved by time. The air hung heavy with the scent of earth and incense, thick and heady enough to settle on your tongue. Your fingertips traced the cold marble basin at the center, its surface ragged and cracked, yet carrying the weight of forgotten devotion. Nearby, the delicate amulet glimmered faintly, casting tremulous reflections on the walls, like errant fireflies caught in an endless dusk. A sound broke the silence, like stone grinding softly against stone. The low rumble vibrated beneath your feet and swirled in the temple's hollow spine. You inhaled slowly, feeling the cool air slide through your throat as a nervous chill grazed your neck. The delicate balance of silence shattered, giving way to an undeniable presence, something unseen but palpably near, as if the temple itself inhaled alongside you. Your eyes flicked toward the far corner, where a shadow shifted just. Beyond, the lantern's glow, a faint pulse of light, now steady and insistent. The fragile scroll in your hands stirred with a life of its own, the linen threads whispering secrets that pricked at your resolve. Your breath caught, heartbeat steady, yet speeding beneath the surface, as the quiet weight of centuries pressed down again. The temple's ancient bones hummed a slow, deliberate chant, a cadence you felt deep in your chest, vibrating through the marrow. You sensed the delicate thread unspooling between present and past, a fragile passage balanced on the edge of revelation. Suddenly, the faint glimmer near the crevice warped and twisted, morphing into a pale, spectral figure barely caught at the corner of your vision. It lingered there, a flicker of translucent light, weaving through the dust motes suspended in air, neither threatening nor retreating. A ghost of memory and hope entwined. Your pulse quickened, held firm by the slow cadence that had become your anchor. You reached out instinctively, your fingertips brushing the cool stone, feeling a tremor ripple up your arm. The grinding grew louder, the distant rhythm folding into a steady roar that vibrated through every stone in the temple. The air thickened and shimmered with a faint electric charge, and the shadows deepened, pulsing with the glow that seemed to breathe alongside you. The sacred hush shattered gently, replaced by an aching expectancy, and in that fragile moment, the temple's secret stirred, awakening in a breathless pause that stretched into eternity. And as the light pulsed once more, slow and steady, you realized that the presence you had sensed was no longer waiting in the shadows, but reaching out, folding the past and present together with a silent summons you could no longer resist. The chamber held its breath, the air thick with a weight that pressed softly against your skin like the lingering chill of dawn. Your hand quivered slightly as it lifted the fragile scroll from the cracked pedestal, careful to cradle it as if it might shatter beneath your touch. Each thread of the linen wrapping felt worn and thin, a delicate shield for knowledge centuries old, binding secrets too fragile even to whisper aloud. The subtle pulse of light near the crevice flickered again, slow and steady, its glow now casting elusive shadows that danced just beyond your vision. You pulled the lantern higher, its flame jostling in a silent rhythm with your steady breaths. The carved hieroglyphs along the walls seemed to lean closer in the low light, their weathered lines weaving delicate patterns that shimmered like faint memories surfacing beneath aged stone. The coolness of the marble basin under your fingertips contrasted with the dry warmth brushing your cheeks. The temple's breath mingled with your own, a silent communion in the fragile space between past and present. A slow grinding tremor hummed beneath the floor, barely perceptible yet unwavering. Your heart synced with its cadence, steady, deliberate. The air thickened with the scent of earth and resin, sharp, bittersweet, curling upward and wrapping around your wrists like a silk thread. You moved deeper into the alcove, each step a measured dance on uneven stone, feeling the rough edges graze against your sandals, grounding your fleeting resolve. The narrow passage stretched before you, swallowed in shadows that pulled at your edges with a reluctant gravity. Your fingers trailed over the cold stone, lingering on rough carvings modeled by time, their fragmented shapes telling stories you felt in marrow and bone rather than understanding. The faint clicking sound shifted, rising in a slow, entrancing rhythm, like the beating of a hidden drum beneath ancient earth. You inhaled deeply, the dry desert air sharp in your throat, mingling with the musty embrace of resin smoke that clung to the temple's breathing walls. As you crossed the threshold of the chamber beyond, a hush settled like dust falling through sunbeams. The vaulted ceiling loomed in shadow, its distant contours faded into the soft blush of early light and distant sand. The walls shimmered faintly with ghostly hieroglyphs, gilded edges whispering gold and azure, flickers of forgotten reverence that trembled beneath the weight of unspoken prayers. Your palm hovered over a stone basin, marred and cracked, a silent altar to devotion long past. Nearby, the delicate amulet glowed faintly, its tarnished metal alive with a quiet pulse that resonated in your fingertips. The grinding grew louder, a low, slow rumble that vibrated through the temple's very bones, echoing like the hush before a storm. You felt the cool air shift, brushing like a whisper across your exposed skin, carrying with it the faint, sweet scent of jasmine carried on a dry wind. Your eyes flicked toward the chamber's far corner, where the narrow crevice yawned, dark and expectant. The faint light within pulsed steadily now, weaving a subtle dance of illumination that played across the jagged edges. Your breath slowed, the tightness in your chest ebbing to a steady calm, linked in unseen chains to the temple's awakening heartbeat. The scroll in your grasp trembled with a life of its own, as if eager, reluctant, to reveal the fragile truths it sheltered. The soft murmur rose again, the rustle of dry leaves stirred by invisible fingers, and your senses sharpened, threading fragile anticipation through every careful step. You moved toward the crevice with deliberate patience, fingertips brushing the stone's rough edge, feeling each uneven groove as a pulse tethered to history. The temple's silence deepened around you, porous yet resolute, a fragile barrier between the known and the shadows beyond. The delicate clicking resumed, a slow, methodical rhythm that seemed to coax the air into subtle movement, casting ripples across the stagnant stillness. Suddenly, the faint glow near the crevice shifted, twisting into a pale figure at the periphery of your sight, a spectral shimmer that hovered briefly, like a whispered promise, before fading into the dust-laden air. Your heart whispered a secret cadence alongside the temple, each beat resonating through cold bones and silent stone. A sharp electric pulse coursed suddenly through the chamber, sending a tingling shiver down your spine as the light pulsed once more insistent now, a subtle summons threading through the ancient veins of the temple. The grinding sound swelled, transforming into a steady roar beneath your feet, shaking dust from the vaulted edges. The shadows deepened, curling and folding like living breath around your form. You step back slowly, the scroll wrapped tight and close, eyes locked on where the spectral flicker had vanished. The temple held its breath, and you with it, as a slow revelation unfolded, dark and tentative and impossible to ignore. From the depths of the crevice, a faint whisper stirred. A single word, almost lost, yet etched in the very fabric of your bones. You leaned in, caught between awe and dread, and the air seemed to crackle with a fragile promise. The temple's secret was no longer waiting. It was reaching. The faint glow near the crevice pulsed steadily, casting hesitant shadows that stretched and trembled across the uneven stone floor beneath your feet. You remained still, your breath shallow and deliberate, the brittle scroll cradled close as a fragile bridge between what was known and what was waiting just beyond the edge of understanding. The ancient temple breathed around you, an unspoken rhythm rising in slow waves through the marrow of the walls, tightening a web of silence that both pressed against and protected the secrets held within. You shifted, the soft scrape of your cloak against the stone breaking the stillness. Yet somehow the sound felt swallowed, etched into the vastness of the chamber, like a muted echo of your own presence. Around you, the carved hieroglyphs leaned closer, their delicate lines seeming to shimmer faintly under the wavering lantern light. The air was thick with the mingled scents of resin and desert dust, clinging like a veil, pressing soft and sharp at once against your skin and in your lungs. A cool breeze whispered through a crack above, rustling the edges of peeling paint. A quiet breath of the outside world intruding into this sanctuary of shadows and ages. Your fingers brushed the brittle linen wrapping again, its threadbare texture fragile beneath your touch, as if the knowledge it held might unravel with the smallest gesture. The scroll's weight was almost nothing, yet the responsibility it carried felt immense. An invisible tether pulling you deeper into the temple's secret embrace. The delicate clicking returned, a slow, measured rhythm like a heartbeat tapping from somewhere far inside the stone, coaxing you forward with patient insistence. Steeling your resolve, you lowered your gaze toward the jagged threshold of the crevice. The shadows pooled dark and thick beyond the narrow opening, swallowing the flickering light whole. You stepped forward carefully, each footfall softened by the worn stone's irregular surface, rough beneath your sandals, like the slow pulse of forgotten decades. The cold air pressed against your face, sharper here, carrying a faint tang of earth and a whisper of something metallic, old yet stirring anew. Your hand found the edge of the carving, a delicate clasp, cool and smooth, worn by centuries of neglect. fingertips lingering, you traced the faint grooves, feeling the secret language beneath your skin, a pattern lost to most but vital to you now. The temple's walls seemed to lean closer still, heavy with silence and anticipation. Every carved face holding its gaze as if waiting for the final gesture that would unlock what slumbered beyond. With measured care, you pressed the latch, feeling the subtle resistance give way as a hidden mechanism shifted deep within the rock. The temperature dropped, a sudden chill curling through the passage like a breath escaping through cracks in frozen earth. The faint light pulsed stronger, weaving slow tendrils of luminescence that wrapped the dark in a gentle glow, revealing a shadowed stairwell spiraling down with slow deliberation into the temple's unseen heart. You paused on the first step, the worn stone cold and uneven beneath your foot, the faint grinding rhythm resonating through the floor in tandem with your own slowing heartbeat. The scent of earth deepened, mingling thickly with resin smoke that clung to the chamber above, the scent of fires long dead but never fully extinguished. Your gaze lifted to where the crevice sealed behind you, the soft flicker of lantern light casting fragile halos against the walls, isolating you in a world suspended between past and present. Each descent was slow, deliberate, the scrape of sandals against stone, whispering of solitude and vigilance. The air grew heavier, richer, with sense of dampness and ancient stone, as if the temple exhaled decades of secrets in each breath you took. Your fingers trailed the roughened wall, pressing into fissures where sand had settled like dust upon cracked parchment. A faint, distant drip echoed quietly, a solitary note punctuating the silence like a soft pulse, melding with the grinding sound that now felt like a slow, steady call from the depths. Further down, the passage opened into a cavernous chamber where the shadows pooled thick and deep, swallowing the edges of your lantern's timid light. The scent of jasmine drifted faintly here, unexpected and sweet, weaving through the ancient earth with a promise both unsettling and oddly comforting. Your breath caught. The temple's heartbeat thudded faintly, a pulse that was no longer your own, but merged with the lingering life of these stones. At the chamber's center stood a vast altar, its surface cracked and mottled with age. Around it, faint blue and gold hieroglyphs shimmered, ghost-like in your lantern's glow, their delicate lines whispering ancient truths beyond your grasp. Your feet settled heavily on the cool floor, every sense attuned to the fragile moment stretching taut between silence and revelation. You stepped closer, the grinding crescendoing into a low roar beneath your sandals, stones vibrating subtly against flesh and bone. The scroll in your hands trembled once more, fragile threads, whispering secrets you could almost touch. The faint glow pulsed, rising in intensity, weaving like a silent flame between shadow and stone. Suddenly, near the chamber's far corner, where darkness clung densest, a shape stirred, a pulse of light bending and folding into an outline just beyond the boundary of clarity. It was no longer distant but near, hesitant yet insistent, a beckoning woven from echoes of memory and fragments of light. Your breath slowed, heart steadying as you reached forward, fingertips trembling, toward the presence that was no longer waiting in shadow, but moving toward you, folding the past and present together in a silent summons that held the promise of everything yet to come. The pulse of the temple's ancient heart slowed as you stood at the threshold, the scroll still warm in your hands, and the fading glow of the amulet casting gentle shadows that danced softly against the worn stone walls. There was no rush now, only the quiet unraveling of a story long held captive in dust and silence. You descended the last steps of the shadowed spiral, the rough edges of the stones beneath your sandals, softened by centuries of neglect and reverence. The heavy breath of the temple settled around you like a familiar cloak, its weight inviting rather than pressing, as if the past itself had chosen to ease its grasp. The grinding rumble ceased, leaving behind a stillness shaped by patience and promise. In the chamber beyond, the air hung thick but tender, redolent with the mingling scents of jasmine and resin, fading like the last notes of a song sung long ago. The faint glow from the amulet pulsed gently against your palm, a heartbeat synchronized with your own, slow, deliberate, and full of a quiet knowing. You let your fingers brush over the cracked altar, the cold stone steady beneath your touch, and with it, the fragile tally of generations who had stood where you did now. The scroll you held, its worn linen creaking ever so slightly, whispered secrets suspended between the past and the present. You traced the delicate edges, feeling the weight of silent vows and forgotten wisdom fold softly into the folds of its parchment. What once seemed an unbearable burden now softened into a sacred trust, a bridge between worlds, fragile yet unbreakable. You stepped back, your gaze lifting to the temple's faint hieroglyphs. Their ghosts of gold and blue shimmered faintly in the lantern's flicker, like stars dimming after a long, deliberate vigil. It was as if the temple itself exhaled, its ancient bones settling into final rest, the secrets it bore no longer pressing for revelation, but offering a gracious farewell. Outside, the desert's warm breath swept gently through the fractured windows, stirring the dust motes that had lain suspended like tiny worlds forgotten by time. The village beyond stirred too, a slow awakening, unburdened by dread or fear, life resilient and persistent, had pushed through centuries of silence to this new day. You tucked the scroll safely into your worn cloak, the threadbare fabric cradle enough to protect its fragile heart, and felt a lightness you hadn't known in days. The pressing responsibility loosened like morning mist, replaced instead by a quiet confidence born of acceptance and understanding. Not all secrets were meant to smother the present. Some were to be carried gently, like a whispered memory, given freely to the dawn. As your sandals traced the familiar path toward the temple's exit, the cool stone beneath your feet warmed subtly under the growing sun, the chill that had clung to these walls retreating into shadow. The hieroglyphs, the carved faces watching silently, seemed to smile faintly in the pale light, their stories complete, their voices resting. You paused at the threshold, the crisp desert air brushing your cheeks with a gentle caress. Beyond the temple's hold, the world awaited, vast, uncertain, but alive, pulsating with the steady rhythm of new beginnings. The heavy silence now felt less like a shroud and more like an invitation to listen, to remember, and then to let go. Closing your eyes for a moment, you breathed it all in. The scent of earth, the fading incense, the soft chorus of the waking village. The temple, with all its quiet mysteries and ancient weight, had given itself over to you for this instant, and now it moved into history once more, a memory folded neatly into the sands. You stepped out, the bright light of day pooling at your feet, and with one last glance back, the temple's shadow stretched, long and gentle, an echo of something eternal and kind. In that moment, the past and present breathed as one. You felt the fragile pulse of time settle into a steady beat, drawing the day closed with the soft promise of peace. The journey had ended, but the story, like the desert wind, whispered softly, always there, waiting quietly beneath the warm sun, in the spaces between stone and sand. You walked on, beneath a sky melting into the gold of early morning, carrying the weight of centuries lightly, as one might carry a secret always meant to be cherished, but never rushed. And as the sun climbed higher, its light spilling warmth over the world, you found yourself wrapped, not in silence, but in the calm that follows knowing, a peace that at last was yours to keep.